Welcome to the JOMA Preventative Health Podcast, hosted by the Jewish Orthodox Women's Medical Association. We provide you with up-to-date information on health topics geared towards the Orthodox Jewish community. This podcast content is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice or as a substitute for the medical advice of a physician.
Welcome to the Jewish Orthodox Women's Medical Association, or JOMA podcast. I'm your host, Elisa Minkin. I am a general pediatrician and proud JOMA member, and I'm really honored and really excited to be here today with Rebbetzin Gila Ross. Before I introduce Gila, I'd like to say, please, if you have any topics you want to hear, comments on the talks I've done, you want to be interviewed, you know someone you want to hear being interviewed, please reach out to us at health, HEALTH, at JOMA, JOWMA.org. We want to hear from you. Gila Ross' vibrant, positive, and relatable style makes her a well-sought-after and much-loved coach and educator with over 20 years of experience. She has a passion for sharing the joy and relevance of Judaism and for positive parenting. Her Power Up podcast was named the top Jewish podcast one of the top Jewish podcasts worldwide. It allows listeners to access her wit, wisdom, and inspiration in their own time. You can find her on Instagram at It's Gila Ross, ITS Gila Ross with no apostrophe, where she shares daily inspiration. She runs parenting courses, offers individual strategy sessions, and also specifically works with parents in schools to help kids develop a healthy relationship with technology. I'm going to link this podcast to two other talks I did on kids and teens and technology, so check the show notes for those. Welcome, Gila. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be speaking to you.
I'm really excited too, because I want to talk about your course about teens and technology. But before we get into that, we really need to talk about parenting teens. And I'm going to say, I'm thinking about this, maybe this is not an apt analogy, but I grew up in the 60s and rock music was like the thing, the generation gap, right? And I think now we have technology as something that feels like such a huge barrier to being able to parent our teens in a way that we feel is effective and build those connections. So I really want to start with talking about the teenage years, because they've always had a bad rap, right? Why?
So that is a really, really good question. And I don't know how far always goes back, but it's interesting because I worked with teenagers for 10 years. We used to run NCSY in Western Canada, and obviously NCSY focuses solely on, for anyone that doesn't know what NCSY is, it is a high school youth group program that provides programming for high school students. So we're working with teens long before my own kids became teenagers. And then when my kids became teenagers, and also in terms of our work, we moved from working with teenagers to working with young families, focusing mostly on adults. I'm an educator, and that's what I do. So I made that shift, and it got me thinking about like teens, working with teens versus working with adults, and as well as parenting kids, younger kids versus parenting teens. And it's a great question that you've asked, and I actually I'm thinking about it, and it's I don't think it's a question I've asked. You know, people kind of take that assumption that about teens, and I don't think I've ever been asked that question before. Why do teens get such a bad rap? And it's interesting because I think about it, and I've loved working with teens, because I find that during the teenage years, kids are discovering themselves, right? And they're asking questions. They want to know why. They want to get to know themselves, the world. And it's a great age group to work with, because there's that curiosity, there's that openness, there's that excitement, that there's honesty as well, right? Like, you can't fob off a teenager. In my experience, I have not managed to do that successfully. And yet, when there's obviously challenges with it, right? Parents that, why do they get a bad rap? Because they can be difficult to parent, right? They present a whole new challenge as parents. What I personally have found is that in some ways I prefer parenting teams. Why? Because you can have a real relationship, right? If you think about, a baby or a 4 or 5 year old, and you're sitting down and you're playing with them or you're listening to their stories, it's very much you doing for them, right? And you're listening to them and you're getting involved into their world, and you're doing what they kind of want to do, right? With a teenager, it's different, right? Because it's not so much you're just playing Candyland together, right? Yeah, you play games together, but they are now becoming their own person. And I think that's what the scary part is right, is because we as parents have to walk that balance between allowing our children to make their mistakes, right? To discover their own independence, to use it. I don't know about you. If I remember my teenage years, I mean, I made a lot of mistakes in the teenage years, right? And the things that I did, like, if I think back and if I think about letting my kids go through those things, then it's scary, right?
Right, especially if your teenager is different than you. Like, I was a straight arrow, okay?
Right.
Maybe that's why we feel differently about this. I was just an academic kid. I didn't do anything.
Right. Wow. Your parents' dream, right?
I was.
Although I wonder what your parents' perspective on that was.
I was the dream kid.
Right. Amazing.
Right, but I mean, the point that I'm making is that it's very hard because they are becoming their own people, and I think we have a tremendous fear is what if they're not like us, right?
Right.
And there's
And
a whole
sometimes that
layer
fear
in the religious world about that, right? We're bringing up, we want to bring up from Jews, and what if they're different than us, right?
what if they choose differently from us?
Mhm,
And you know what another fear is? What if
mhm,
they're exactly like us? Right?
right.
Sometimes that's a fear that shows up in parenting, and not just teenagers, but it's interesting because a lot of people ask me questions about parenting, and for people that have more than one kid, they'll find that they have a kid that's most like them. And for a lot of people, parenting the child that's like them is the most difficult,
Wow.
because it brings up like all those things of all that, it depends, like, if I'm not, you know happy with what I am, or if I see myself in my child, if I see those failings in my child, and I'm nervous about how that's going to be, like, sometimes the parent that's least like that child is easier. It's easier for that parent to parent that child than the parent that is like that child.
Right, and it also matters how you were parented, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you want to talk for a few minutes about parenting style? Because I think parenting style always matters, but I think everything just matters more in the teenage years.
Right. So tell me a little bit more what you mean by parent.
So, what I mean by parenting styles is if you look in literature, psychology literature, they've been referring to primarily three styles or types of parenting. Um, they are called authoritative, authoritarian, and permissive. It's confusing because authoritarian and authoritative sound so similar. Um, there's actually a fourth subtype, which is neglectful, and they can be looked at on a scale of how responsive you are to your kids and how much you demand of them. So the authoritarian parenting style is very much, I tell you what to do, you listen. It is not particularly responsive to the child or teenager. It is all, coming from the parent. And neglectful would be the one where you don't ask anything and you also don't respond. And of course, that is unquestionably bad. Then there is the permissive style, which is very responsive to the child, but doesn't really ask much of them. Often the parent may overindulge in the child to avoid conflict. And the recommended style, is called authoritative. And this is one where it is demanding of the child. There are rules, there's structure, but it's also very responsive. So it provides a lot of clear boundaries and expectations, but a lot of responsiveness and warmth to the child and teenager. And that has also been called balanced parenting. And this is from the work of Diana Baumrind, a developmental psychologist, and also Stanford researchers Eleanor McCoby and John Martin.
Yes, you're 100% right. And I like to call it, and I think this is based on the research that John Gottman and his institute has done, the coaching style of parenting, right? Whereas if you think about a coach, and a coach kind of is there for you, but it's there to help you develop yourself. And sometimes you got to, the coach is going to tell you what to do. Right now, parenting is a little bit different, right? Because when a person goes to a coach, they're paying for that coaching, and they want that coaching, right? Our kids don't want it. I mean, they do when it's done right? But they deep down want it, but obviously they're going to resist it because no one likes being told what to do, right? But what's the premise behind coaching, and how does that come into parenting? Is that the idea is that we are there with our child, for our child, in order to bring out the best in our child, right? In order to, and this, we see this in the words, in the Hebrew words for education, right? Which is chinuch, right? Which comes from the word like Chanukah Sabayit, which means like an inauguration, right? What is chinuch? What's the job of a parent? It's to enable your child to understand themselves and to give them the tools to overcome their weaknesses, to develop their strengths, so that when they get to the age of around 18 or so and they're adults, they're able to they're fully prepared to step into the world as as functioning adults and bring their best to the world.
I love that. And the rest of it is Hanach Lana'ar Alpi Darko, that you have to do it Alpi Darko, according to their way.
Yeah.
That wisdom is right there.
Yeah, which is what it is you have to, right? Like, and it's I think why we struggle a lot with parenting is because you can't, the jokes they say about parenting, or especially when you're parenting like babies, and I think the same thing with teenage, any age, is like as soon as you figure out, it changes, right?
Right.
Because it does, because it's very, very individual. Yes, there's ideas and there's concepts, and I think a parent should never stop learning, and a parent should always be in that environment of growth and development, because that's what we want for our kids. So that's what we have to do. But it's very individual, right? It's what does this particular child that I have, not necessarily the child that I wanted or dreamed for, but the child that I have needs in this particular moment.
Right. But I think what makes it so hard is we're going to get back to technology. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, in order to do all this, you have to have conversations, have that relationship. And I think a lot of parents are really struggling with this because technology, it really feels like it's taking over a lot.
Yep. And can I say something?
Yes.
How many of us have a healthy relationship with technology, right? So here we are trying to parent, and I think there's two things about technology that we struggle with, right? Number one, we're trying to teach our children in a world that is changing so fast that we're struggling with all those changes, right? How many people do you know, or how many people that are listening out there can comfortably say, yeah, I'm good. I've got a healthy relationship with my phone, with technology, whatever, right? We're struggling with it. At the same time that we're trying to teach our children, we want better for our kids. We don't want our kids to be addicted to technology. We don't want our kids to be on social media and all that negative impact that we're sensing of like the self-esteem and how we see other people, how we compare ourselves. We don't want that for them. We haven't figured out ourselves. And at the same time, the technology is an impediment to that relationship that we're trying to build with them.
Exactly.
Right? Because screen time is fun, right? It feels good. It feels good for us. Like, you're in, if your child's little, right? You're in the playground and it's boring to be in the playground with your child, and you've got your phone and you take a break, right? which is, it's got its positives and its negatives, right? Like, but it's, as they get older, for the teenagers as well, it's fun, right? You have a fight with your parent. You don't even have a fight with your parent. Like, your parents are not as interesting as a video game or social media, or or watching all the action on technology. It's so you've got those two things. You've got, number one, it in itself is a challenge to the relationship, and we're trying to teach our kids when we haven't yet fully figured it out either.
Right. It always comes back to, it's not about what you should be doing to help your child. It's also about what you should be doing to help you.
Yeah.
Right. I feel like it comes up at so many of my podcasts on parenting.
Yeah, because it's, look, the most powerful way we impact our kids is by who we are and the relationship we have with them, right? So, yeah,
And I think you can get away when your kids are younger. This is what makes the teens so challenging. You can often get away when your kids are younger by just making the rules and enforcing the rules. And then they become teenagers and start questioning them, or they just know technology better than you.
Right. And some of the things is that, I've heard this in certain places, right? They'll tell kids technology is bad, right? Now, you could say that to a 6, 7, 8-year-old, right? But a teenager is going to say to you, hold on a second, right? Let's say they were a really religious kid. You're saying technology is bad. What about Torah Anytime, right? Which is an incredible website, only streaming Torah content, thousands and thousands and thousands of classes. Like, you're telling me technology is bad? And at the same time, I see that it isn't. And we have to be comfortable to get into that nuanced conversation with our kids to say, that's not the question.
Right.
The question isn't, is technology good or bad? The question is, how powerful is this thing that we hold in our hands?
It's very powerful. And I'm thinking about how we know that the earlier a child or teenager is exposed to drugs, the more impact, more dangerous it can be on their young developing brains. Well, it's the same thing for technology. I'm not trying to be fear-mongering. I want to do the opposite of that here. And I love how you're doing this. I don't want to undermine what you're doing at all. But in an article I just read, somebody compared technology to the ocean, right? You don't just throw your kid in the ocean, right? It's about giving them skills, and it's about understanding safety, right?
Yeah. And if I can push the analogy a little bit further, is I sometimes what I think is that we are so afraid of this ocean that we tell our kids, don't go.
Right.
Don't go into the
right. I'm thinking of a map where they say there be dragons.
Without realizing
Right.
that our kids are going to be in that ocean.
Right.
At some point, right? Like,
right.
For so many of our kids to say there is no, or to just give them black and white rules without getting them comfortable and saying, you know what, this is here. This is a huge part of our life. It's a huge part of my life. It's going to be a huge part of my life. And it's my responsibility as a parent, as an educator, to give my kids, to give the people that I teach, or whatever, if people are educators that are listening, the tools so that they can develop a healthy relationship with this massive thing.
Absolutely. So I want to talk for just a few minutes. You had written an article about teens and technology that I had read, and you talked about setting limits within the challenge that teens are more tech savvy than their parents on average. I want to talk about that a little bit, please.
Yes. So, okay. So I want to, before I start this, I want to say is that my approach to teens, technology with ourselves, technology, and generally most things in life is that very few things are just like one-step solutions, right? Like, I think it's very simplistic to kind of say, put a filter on my phone and we're good, right? Or put a, I'll have the Wi-Fi switched off at 10 o'clock at night and that's it, we're good, right? It's all about layers, right? Layers and layers and layers. And each thing can be helpful, but it's not one-off, right? It's not just, okay, that you do that and you're good, right? I think we're being naive if we think that way. And it's the same thing with limits, right? You can have all these apps, that create limits. But likely there are going to be teens out there that know how to get past those limits, right? Or hang out with other kids that don't have those types of limits, right? So that's where it comes in to the other things that we need to do as parents, right? Because also as our kids get older, and this again goes back to why parenting teens is harder, is because we have less control over them. Right?
Exactly. Right. You're talking about filters and all of these other things that the parent does to try to control the child, and then the child becomes a teenager.
Yes. Yeah. And it's just really, the truth is, if we think about it, it's the same in other areas of
Right.
of parenting as well, right? When your kid is young, you can tell them, you do X, you know, you do thing, and they'll do it because they rely on us, right? When they're 13, 14, 15, you don't really get away with it. When you're 18, you don't get away with it at all, right?
Right.
They make their own decisions. And that's when the education has to turn to not just us as parents putting these limits outside, but the coaching part of it, right? Like the teaching, the education, let's look at it together. Let's understand this thing that we have, right? Let's understand this very, very powerful thing that we have, and let's understand how to use it in a way that is going to improve your life and not a thing. And it starts by actually looking at, you know, getting really knowledgeable about what is it, right? You know, how does it impact my life, right? And teaching our kids how to ask the right questions about it, and how to be mindful, and giving them also that protective space where they can come to us and have these conversations.
That's a really, really important point that I want to underscore, this idea of the protected space. You know, I was thinking of a talk that I did with Rabbi Tzvi Gluck of Amudim, where he tells his kids, you know, if you're out with your friends and they're doing something I had told you that, you know, was dangerous, say like they're drinking and you're in trouble, you know, here's a code word and you can call me up and I will not ask any questions. I will pick you up. I will not yell at you. You will not be in trouble. And so I think the same applies to technology as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, yes, it applies to the thing that we have to put our fear aside, because we have to realize that our kids need us to be able to have these conversations with us. They need to be able to come, and they need to be able to look at it. You know, like, we have to be comfortable with explaining to a child what the dangers are of it, right? Because they're not just going to buy into this, like, oh, it's terrible and whatever. I mean, not the teens that I've met anyway. So.
Right. And I like how you say it's really important for the parent to know enough about this. I think that's one of the problems, is if you feel you're in over your head in that ocean, right? You don't know enough about how to talk to your kids about technology, that you need to do that.
Yeah. And I think that the good part about it is that once you recognize that you don't know enough, then it's very easy to fix, right? You just go and find out, right? Like, we live in an information age, right? Where it's very easy to kind of, like, I think that's the thing that sometimes parents or educators struggle with. Like, they're going to ask me a question that I'm not going to know the answer to. It's fine. Just tell them, I don't know. Let's find out, right? Let me ask someone else, right? Because there are people and there is research out there, and there is all the answers to it, right? We're not just saying no in a vacuum, right? We're saying no because there are serious concerns about how to use it, and it's not just a religious from issue. It's an issue.
Oh no, for sure.
I was Matthias Barker, who's a psychotherapist, and he's got a very big online platform. So he's also a psychotherapist in practice, and he was talking once about technology and kids. And someone asked him, he has a young child, what would you let your child? And he says, I'm not going to let my child, he's not Jewish, I'm not going to let my daughter have a smartphone until they're 18. Right, which obviously sparked a reaction, because, like, what do you mean 18? Like, that's absurd, that's crazy, right? And someone asked him, like, but aren't you afraid of the social impact of that? And he said, and this really, I think, stuck with me. He said, I am afraid of the social impact it's going to have and the isolation that it might cause if she is the only one of all her peer group that doesn't have a smartphone until she's 18, but I'm more afraid of her having a smartphone, right?
Wow.
And why can he say that is because he knows, right? And again, and I think sometimes as religious parents, we need to take it out of the religious aspect, not completely, because and I think this goes back to parenting, and my belief is that health has three components. It's our physical health, it's our mental health, and it's our spiritual health. And you can't divorce one from the other, right?
Right.
For a person to be truly healthy, they need to have all those three, right? So we don't need to take it completely out, because at the end of the day, there's a spiritual part of us that also needs to be looked after and fed for our own health. But we also have to take it wider than just the spiritual, the religious aspect of it, because it's not just a spiritual, it's not just a spiritual question. It's not just a religious question for our kids.
Oh, not at all. Remember, I've compared it to drugs, where we know that the later onset of starting, the better prognosis, right? There are definite dangers here. I read about communities where they all, band together to say, we're not going to give our kids smartphones till X. So it doesn't become that one child standing out. It's hard.
Yeah, it is hard. It is very, very hard. And we can't get away from that. We can't get away from the fact that it is hard. The question is, which hard do we choose?
Right. No, it's really, really true. And the other thing I want to point out is that it's so important for us to try to be calm about this, because I think, when you're dealing with teens, a lot of times they go into lizard brain mode, right? Where they can become easily, upset and dysregulated. We can't mirror that, right? We have to stay calm.
Yes. And it's hard. And
Yes.
you know what? If we recognize that we're getting calm, it's okay to put a pause on the conversation, come back for it later. If we have overreacted, then it's fine. Go back and talk to your kid about how you overreacted. And I think this is something also that comes up, is a lot of times we're so concerned, which it's hard for us to disentangle their behavior from our overreaction. And I think when we can do that, it's a very powerful parenting moment, because when we can kind of say, you know what, my kids did X, Y, Z, which was not acceptable, and I reacted in a way that wasn't acceptable, and say, I'm going to take responsibility for that, and actually go and have that conversation with our kid and say, you know what, let's not look at what you did. I overreacted,
Wow.
right? And I'm sorry for that. Then I think is when we can actually have that conversation about the thing, right? Because as long as our kids know when we overreact, right? They know it. So we just like we know when our kids overreact, they know it, right? So when we have the strength of character to actually say, you know what, I overreacted, that's when, firstly, we're teaching our children how to repair when we've messed up, and we're also opening for them the door of saying, you know what, my parents owned up for overreacting, and now I can listen to what they have to say about the thing.
And you're humbling yourself. I mean, it is so beautiful on so many levels. I love it even just from the perspective of, I think a lot of times parents feel, I messed up, I'm not good, and then they just go down that hill of guilt. And so the option for repair, I think, is really powerful. And I think it's something you always have.
Yeah, and
I think for any age.
I believe the research shows that what happens is not as important as how we handle it afterwards, right? So, which is a very, very powerful thing to know as parents, because I think a lot of times what we struggle with as parents is those times when we mess up, right? And it's not just the messing up, but it's the fears of like, oh my goodness, I messed up. What is that going to do to my child? But knowing that we have the option and the possibility to go back to our child and repair it is such a huge thing for us as parents, and it's such a powerful tool in our parenting as well.
Right. Well, the next part is modeling. What's the best way to teach your child? By what you do.
Absolutely.
By what you say.
And also, what's the hardest part in teaching your child?
Doing the right thing yourself.
By modeling. Yes.
Yes. But it's so powerful. And I love that. And I loved how in the article you said that the actual moments of, I'm going to quote you exactly, the moments of conflict around screen time are actually teachable moments. So I think we may fear, I don't want to, fight over this all the time. I don't want to like get into that conflict. But that is a chance to actually have those conversations, right? But maybe more after.
Yeah. So I actually think this is a game-changing concept in parenting in general. Is that very often we feel like we have two goals in parenting, right? We have the big picture goal of I want to raise my kids with these values. I want them to be healthy. I want them to be a contributing member. I want them to be happy. All those other things that we want for our children. And then we also have the very real goal of I need to get through today, right? And what when we can sort of marry those two goals, that's when we can that's very powerful. Is that actually how am I going to teach my child all those other things is by getting through today, right? And it's those things, right? So sometimes you can do it in the moment, sometimes you can't. Sometimes you have to do it ahead of time, right? For example, if you have decided that it's now the right time that my child's going to get a smartphone, whatever the age is, then you sit down ahead of time and have those conversations with your child. You say to them, look, I'm going to give you a smartphone. Here's what happens oftentimes to people that have smartphones, right? Here's the things that you might encounter. How are we going to deal with it? What things can we put in place? What boundaries can we put in place? What guidance can we put in place so you can have a healthy relationship with your child, right? So firstly, you're preempting it, right? But there's going to be a time where it comes up again, right? And when you can step back from that moment and sort of rein your whatever the emotional reaction is to it, and say, actually, this is a teachable moment, right? Then you can teach your child, and it changes. I think it lessens our emotional reaction to it, and it also helps us actually take that moment of conflict and turn it into a moment where I'm on your side and I want to help you get through it, right? So it's not me versus you about this thing, right? Because that's usually what conflict is. It's me versus you about the I'm telling you now to get off your phone, right? No, it's like I'm here with you, I'm on your side, and I want to teach you how, if you said you were going to be on your phone for an hour and the hour's now up, you have to follow through on that, right? Or I'm going to teach you how to have healthy boundaries around it, or whatever the thing is that's the conflict is you can say, okay, you can think it's a mindset at first, right? In your mind, then you can express it to your child, but I'm on your side and I'm here to help you learn how to use this effectively.
Right. And also in the moment is not always the best time to do things. You can think about it as going back later when it's easier to be calmer. And even to say, to model, I was upset then, but now I want to talk about it.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's sometimes in the moment it's not the best time. Sometimes, we're not in the place to talk, they're not in the place to listen. Sometimes it's before, sometimes it's during, sometimes it's afterwards. That's it. Yeah.
Right. Also, because again, the tension you kind of alluded to before is you're trying to control me. And even if you yourself are in that mode of, I want to make you stop doing this, as opposed to the coaching, which is a hard thing to do. And especially as you're trying to switch over with a more mature child to a more mature coaching as opposed to telling style.
Yeah. And perhaps that's the fear that we have as parents, is that we know we can't control them, right? We can only educate them.
Not everybody knows that. Okay, no. I would say that authoritarian parents think that they can continue to try to control their child. And I think that there are parents with that style.
Right. And at the moment of conflict, perhaps, and I don't know if this is true, it's something I'm throwing out as we're talking, is perhaps why they overreact so strongly is because there's that fear, right? That fear that they can't really control them, right? Because they can't. You can't, like, you can't, it gets to a certain age and you can't control your child anymore, right?
Right. We know the research is not back up authoritarian parenting.
Yes. Yeah, no. because 100%.
Particularly in the teenage years, that's when, it tends to backfire.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to talk for a few minutes about helping teens with the boundaries, because when you talk about boundaries, if you're talking about authoritarian, you're saying you do this, you turn off your smartphone, or you don't get one, or you this, or you that. So another way would be to help them set their own boundaries, right?
Yeah. And I think when we're thinking about teenagers, especially as they grow older, is they have to buy into it, right? Especially if we're looking at it as a long-term goal. If I want my child to have a healthy relationship with technology, right? They have to buy into those boundaries or guidelines, right? It could be when your child is young and just starting on their smartphone, which is different ages for different communities, that you can turn around to them and say, look, these are the rules. You don't follow the rules, you lose your phone, right? As our kids get older, they develop the means to pay for their own phones, right? They develop the means to have their own phones and, if necessary, hide it from you. So we do lose that control as our kids get older. So if our goal is if our goal is just, I don't want my kid on technology until they're 18, then you might get away with it. But if your goal is, probably not, but
I know we're not even going to go there right now.
Yeah. But if your goal is, I want my child to have a healthy relationship with technology. I want my child to be able to understand when it's having a negative impact on their life and be able to stop or put the things in guideline. That comes through education. It has to be education. We have to teach our children what the dangers are, what the questions they should be asking, right? What the guidelines are, what the challenges of having that healthy relationship are. And we have to teach them, the people that do have more of a healthy relationship with them, what are they doing right? And we can borrow, we don't just need to look at technology, we can borrow from anything else, right? What do people who what do people who are successful do, right? Accountability is a huge thing, right? And for teenagers, they bristle at the word accountability, right? So again, we have to teach them in the context of, you have accountability in your life. Think about exams, right? What is exams? It's accounts. Why do kids take exams so seriously? And why do schools take exams so seriously? Is because, especially when you're talking about state exams, is because there's accountability there, right? The schools are going to be accountable based, especially in the UK. That I don't know if it works the same in the States, but at the end of the high school exams, tables come out depending on what the overall grades were within the school. And they get rated, right? There's a ton of accountability. When we can kind of take the accountability out of that parent-child relationship, and it's me trying to control you, and actually say accountability is very, very powerful, right? How can we use this to get where we want to get, right? That's, I think, and it's teaching our kids all these different types of concepts that help them understand what they're dealing with and how to deal with it. And this is what I do I have a course that I teach in schools. This is a subject that I've been passionate about a long time. I've got a large social media following, so I deal with social media a lot, right? Technology a lot. And it's something that I feel so strongly about. It's such a big part of our life. We have to learn how to use it in a way that gets us the results that we want, and we have to teach that to our kids. And I was thinking, what's the best way to get that information to the teenagers? So I've done this course through schools, a few different schools, and where I go through different concepts, six sessions, and we go through different concepts that gives our kids the tools that they can have to actually develop that healthy relationship with teenagers.
That is amazing. Is that available in America?
So that is a good question. So I actually, I'm currently in the UK, but we're actually moving to the States shortly.
Ooh.
Yes. So
welcome.
Thank you. We'll be moving to Denver, Colorado.
Oh, I have to connect you with someone. Okay.
Oh, exciting. So it definitely will be available in the States. Yeah.
Is it a in person? Is it a digital? Is it both?
Both. And so that's totally up to the school. They can choose to do in person, or they can choose to do digital. And for schools that are not local, I offer like a let's say a 1 day program, right? Instead of, ideally what I like to do is 6 sessions weekly, right, for 6 weeks. So it sort of gives the kids time to digest, think it over, integrate it, and come back to the next one. But a 1 day session is also really, really great, and that's an option for schools that are not local.
Now, are the parents involved with this course?
No, no. So
So,
this particular course is given to teens,
mhm.
and I do have a course that is that is designed for parents and teens. And that one I haven't yet launched, but I'm very excited to launch that, because I think, again, as we talk about it, if a parent is involved in this, it is so powerful, right? Because at the end of the day, it's great to have a course and it's great for kids to get these things, but if they have that parent, that safe person that they can talk to about these things, that can guide them through on as they're going through it, right? Think of yourself as the coach in their life, right? That can whatever coach them through it, then it takes it to a different level.
No, I think it's really, really important. I don't see how you can just work with teens and not work with their parents, because then the parents don't have the skills.
100%. So why I started with schools and not through parents is there's 2 things. Number one, much greater access to teens that way, right? And the reality is that not every teen is going to have a parent that is
Right.
available to do that for whatever reason, right? Those teens also need tools, right?
Right.
So,
No, for
so
sure.
yeah, so that's kind of where, and especially with teens that are older up in the high school system, they can really use these tools well, right?
Right. But my question is, do you send them home with like something for their parents to say, these are things you can discuss with your kids. These are some websites to go to or something to connect to the parents at the same time, or not at all?
I don't. I mean, it's a
Mhm.
great idea. It is a great idea, and maybe something I should look at incorporating.
Right. I
But
mean, like, your course for parents could be like a more in-depth, but just to not leave the parents out
yeah,
at
yeah,
this time when they may feel so disempowered. So
yeah,
food for thought
yeah. No,
on that one.
it is a it is a really good idea. I'd love to put it into practice and see how it integrates, and how parents buy into that, because I think it
Right,
is.
right. No, this is a really, really hard topic. It really, really is. But I'm so glad that you're doing this. I think it's so important and so
It is so
valuable.
important.
There are some other programs out there, um, but nothing quite like yours. And so I'm really excited to be getting it here hopefully soon.
Thank you, thank you. Yes, no, it is. It really is important, because it's here, like it or not. It's
Right.
here. It's part of our life. And we need to learn how to have a healthy relationship, and we need to teach that to our kids. We do them a massive service when we give them those tools, because they are going to have to interact with technology.
Right. And it's not a one-time conversation. I don't know if we had said this earlier. It is like everything else important. It is many, many teachable moments
Yes,
adding up over time.
yes. And the good thing about technology is you're going to have plenty of teachable moments. As as a parent with a child, you are going to have plenty, which is means you'll be able to teach them those skills, and over time.
Right. And I'm going to repeat that it's okay to mess up. Right. It's okay to make a mistake. And if you think about it that way, there's more teachable moments that way too.
Yeah. And can I say something? It's not just okay, it's a reality,
Right. It's normal.
right? You are going to mess up, right? And again, messing up is a teachable moment, right?
Exactly.
When we mess up, we get to teach our kids how number one, that we're not perfect, which is good, because it helps them understand they don't have to be perfect. and it teaches them how to recover from that, how to repair a mess up.
Right. And we're all trying to learn how to live in a world that has really radically changed because of technology.
Yeah.
Right. It's continuing to accelerate at a fast pace. And so it's a learning curve for all of us.
Yeah.
Right. So I want to thank you so much for doing this with us. I can't wait until your courses all come out and you come here.
Thank you.
Be well.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for having me. And it was so great to talk to you and to hear your input and the work that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you so, so much.
Pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the JOMA Preventative Health Podcast. If you've enjoyed this, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and share this with your friends. For more information, check out our Instagram at JOMA_org. Check out our website, www.joma.org, that's JOWMA.org, or email us at health@joma.org.